all great stories. I love biographies. And there's not one biography of someone great that did not have to go through hell. So before, people weren't talking about toxic culture. And then all of a sudden, things started to be revealed. Now, all of a sudden, it's like anything can be toxic. I've made a leader to be way more quote-unquote toxic than actually they were because of my childhood. I've learned some of the best lessons of my life being under not great leadership. I'm a better man, a better leader, a better husband, a better friend because I was willing to stay in those environments. Because sometimes your codependency will cause you to stay somewhere you don't need to be.
Do you think that you exhibit any traits of a toxic leader?
Hey, what's up, guys? I want to welcome you back to another episode of the New World Podcast. It's your boy, Adrian. And across from me, because she's mocking how I do my intro, I am joined. Normally I give her a compliment, but I'm joined by my mid-co-host, Breezy. Breezy, what's happening?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. As we're recording this, man, got a big week ahead of us. A lot of travel, man, on my way to Atlanta when we finish this and watch my son play basketball. Always a fun time for me. Not really, because again, as a former basketball player, again, I am, my anxiety gets highs because I really want him to do his best. So I'm trying to learn how to be on the side and get my woosah on as I'm watching him play. But no, I'm excited to watch him play. And then I jump on a plane and headed to LA for 4 days. We got some client work out there, then flying to Jacksonville. And after that, I got to speak at an event in Jacksonville. So it's going to be a little bit of a busy week, man. So yeah.
So exciting. And where are we going when we're in LA?
Nobu. We have always wanted to go to Nobu. And so, yeah, so we're taking the team to Nobu. It's going to be fun. Looking forward to going out to LA. So, yeah, it's going to be fun. So, Bri, as we're recording this pod, it's a few weeks after. And then when this drops, it's going to be definitely more weeks after. But we do want to get your take because, again, if you don't know, Breezy is really into fashion. Really into fashion. Obsessed
I'm
about
not a
fashion.
Connoisseur quite yet.
But you're getting there, though.
But I'm on the trajectory.
You are. And so, as we're recording, the Met Gala was a few weeks back. Well, let me ask you a question. So just give me who is your favorites or a couple of your favorites.
Oh, my favorite was for sure Queen of Genovia, Anne Hathaway.
Dude, she was really good.
She killed it.
Yeah.
I thought that the theme this year, as far as like a line of beauty, was really good. You know, there's a lot of controversy around Karl Lagerfeld, I think is how you pronounce his last name. So, you know, everyone has a lot of different feelings about that. But I thought that this was the first year in a minute since people were actually really on theme.
Yep.
The only thing that gets me about the Met Gala, outside of people being on theme, is that the venue on the outside.
Is it buns?
It just never, like the carpet. It just always looks like cheap, kind of tacky to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wish they would do something that still matched the theme, but would show more support to all the different outfits. Because when you have people wearing so many different colors and designs and fabrics and things of that nature, the photos just start looking so like tacky based off of the background.
Yeah. I tell you what, I just saw it because I was going through your story, and then you know how that goes. You start looking at somebody's story and Met Gala's mentioned. So then all of a sudden, you start, then I go on TikTok, and I don't know how Instagram, again, I feel like Instagram and TikTok are connected because all of a sudden I get all this Met Gala stuff. So my favorite one was Shea Gilgeous-Alexander.
Oh, he's my top guy. For sure. The guys ate it up this year at the Met Gala.
Shea Gilgeous, and again, he's really big basketball player, Oklahoma City Thunder, and he's really big in the fashion, and so man, he really, really killed it. My guy Pusha T, they all were kind of in that same theme. So yeah, it was actually.
Who was it? Diddy?
No, I don't think it was Diddy. It's Pusha T and Pusha T, Shea Gilgeous. It was somebody else. I can't remember, but yeah, the same theme. So, well, Bri, I appreciate your correspondence. Letting us know. Maybe one day, you know what I'm saying? Maybe one day we'll just be, we'll film a pod at the Met. You know what I'm saying? Maybe that's the goal. Writing new rules. So we'll see. But well, hey, if you are new here, we exist to unlock human flourishing, and we believe that happens through authenticity. We are really bent on really helping see the world have more authentic leaders, and so we just talk talk on a wide range of topics, diving deep, some controversial, but we really get to a street level on what leadership looks like, but authentic leadership. So I believe every human being can really be authentic and can be a leader. You may not be leading thousands, but you may be leading just in your home. You may be leading a couple people, but I believe every person has the ability to lead. And we believe that the world coming forward is in desperate need of authentic leaders. And so that's what we do. And so we unpack that. We have fun. A lot of times just me and Breezy going back and forth. And then eventually in the future, we'll bring guests in. But you know what? But for us to bring guests in, they got to be the right guests. We're just not just trying to bring anybody in, but actually people who are writing new rules, people who have broke the code and are actually out there doing real meaningful work. And so with that being said, make sure you like, you subscribe, you share, write a comment, review on iTunes. If you have an Android phone, like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that on an Android phone. All right. So I know all the Android people, you're going to hate me, but sorry, get your game up. But anyway, all that being said, we are going to jump into our pod today. I'm super excited to talk about this topic. We're going to talk about the benefit of toxic leadership.
Ooh.
I know, because we're living in the world
Very controversial of you.
It is, because the truth is that we're living in a time to where the revealing of toxic things, toxic workplace environments, toxic behavior from executives, and all of that stuff 100% needed to be revealed and needs to be called out. But there is a problem now. I believe everything's toxic. Anything that becomes resistance, anytime there's maybe how your boss may speak to you, we say it's not a safe space or whatever. And I think we're missing a ton, because I believe there are some things that when it comes to maybe tough leadership, it's that toxic leadership that's actually needed, that helps you build resilience, which again, we think that's part of the formula to actually help you become an authentic leader. And so we're going to dive into it, because I can tell you, I've learned some of the best lessons of my life being under not great leadership.
And so what would you say the difference is between toxic and tough, just to give us a solid foundation before we get into it?
Yeah. I mean, when you first start off, let's start with toxic. I mean, we're talking about things that are like sexual abuse. That is toxic. I mean, we are talking about, heavy, when I say racism, where it's like, people are using their power to stop you from moving forward, to hinder you, simply based off your skin color, or the fact of people doing that because of your gender or your sexuality or something of that sort, to where they're purposely, there's very clear evidence of purposely stopping you from moving up or advancing and things like that. I think some levels of verbal things, again, that's going to be one of those lines where, if somebody's coming in every single day cussing you out, yeah, that's a little bit excessive and toxic, but hey, somebody may cuss you out once because you didn't get something done. That's not toxic. That's just a tough. I think a tough environment are things that actually help build things within you. They're within boundaries. But I think we got to define, as we talked through today, what those boundaries actually are. Tough environments are environments that make you better. And sometimes those environments may not be from the best leadership. See, I think everybody today is living in a fantasy. Everybody wants perfect leadership. They want the leader that is authentic, aware, is in tune to your needs, has great motivational speeches. Super strategic. We want perfect leaders, and there's just none around. And I think that because of that, we're seeing some people leave places that actually may be good for them.
Mm-hmm. So what would be an example to show that people, one, are living within a fantasy? And two, why do you feel like the culture as a whole is approaching life that way?
Well, I'm going to start with the second part of your question. The culture is living here as a whole because we go to extremes. When you live in a culture, we've talked about this before, an anxiety-filled culture, that I believe that a lot of our culture today is just based on anxiety, the ability, that thing that's just always the fear of what's going to happen. And because of that, what we tend to do in our culture now is we just swing. So before, people weren't talking about toxic culture. And then all of a sudden, things started to be revealed. Now, all of a sudden, it's like anything can be toxic. And I think that that's where we just kind of swing as culture. We go to extremes, especially in our world, because of the anxiety. I think an example of people like leaving in a situation where they would say it's toxic, but it's tough, right? An example of that, like I kind of mentioned earlier, you come in and you didn't meet your deadline and your boss goes nuts. He may cuss you out. He may be pissed. I'm talking about like going in And what you instantly say is, oh, that's toxic. That's a toxic boss. Well, you didn't do your job. And you know what? Man, should your boss have cussed you out? Maybe, maybe not. But at that time, you didn't do your job, and you didn't do your job well. And so what can happen is that sometimes, because when you hear that stuff, how it makes you feel. And because in our world today, we've taught so much about people not feeling bad about themselves that, yeah, if you don't do your job and you miss it, you should feel bad. There should be a feeling. That doesn't mean that you're bad, but you should feel bad when you miss the moment. When you miss the mark on a situation, you should feel bad. And what that normally should do is motivate you to move forward. But what we do now is we try to avoid that feeling. We don't like the feeling anymore of any type of shame. And now what I mean by that, I want to be careful because, again, I don't think people should live in shame at all. But what I mean is like the embarrassment, for example, or the pain that or somebody's disappointed with you. That is where I feel like people are missing and they end up leaving.
Mm-hmm. So why would you say that as a culture we kind of grab onto these words, the words being like trigger or toxic or trauma, and we overuse them? It's like we hear them and then everyone starts to use them. We overuse them so much that they end up just being misused.
Yep.
Why do you feel like we do that? And we start labeling stuff as it.
Yeah. Because this is really going to make people mad. Here's why. Because people are so insecure that they now want attention. Not everybody, because this is the issue. Because I can't stand people using these words, like you said, trigger, trauma, because there are real people with real triggers and real trauma. And now it gets watered down. It's kind of like racism. We can't say everything is racist because then when the things are really racist, it's watered down. And I think that that's what happens. People just use that for attention. So to get people's attention, let me say triggered, let me say trauma, I need a safe space, whatever. And you're like, no, you didn't get triggered. You just you felt bad. You know what I'm saying? That's not trauma. You know what I'm saying? Like my boss said, I got trauma. No, no, that person on the playground that pushed you one time, that's not like trauma. That's just a moment. And I think we go there because in our world, we try to take words that make us pop, that'll give us more attention. So we use those, it's like the boy who cries wolf. Let me say big words so you pay more attention to me. And what that is that's a lack, and that's insecurity and emptiness in a person, and trying to find other people to fill them, to make them feel more validated about the situation. You don't have to use big words to feel validated. Just say what it is. And here's the thing. And then let people who are close to you speak to, is it toxic? Was that a trigger? Was that really trauma? Because those who are close to you, they know your story. They know oh yeah, I get that. But sometimes you may have people around like, nah, chief, dude, you just dropped the ball. That wasn't trauma. That wasn't a trigger. And I think we can't use those words. I think you need to be very careful using that word, because here's the thing, that does not honor real victims.
Right.
That's the thing. It's dishonoring even to real victims when you use that words when they're actually not that.
So jumping into your story a little bit, have you ever experienced what would be called toxic leadership?
Yes, I have, but I actually stayed in it. And I know in today's world, oh my gosh, why would you stay there? And the reason I say that now is because, we didn't have, maybe it would be different if I was in a different environment, if we were living our current cultural moment, but I've been in environments where, people have purposely tried to harm my career, harm me from moving forward. I've been in environments where many times I'm the first black person that's there, where there is unconscious racism and very conscious racism. And I stayed there. And I can honestly tell you, I'm a better man, a better leader, a better husband, a better friend, because I was willing to stay in those environments. Now I look back on it, some of them maybe I should have left a little bit earlier, but when it's all said and done, I don't regret it. I'm just a much better person and a much better leader. And I think people get the benefit from what I went through helps me now try to create an environment for people like yourself and others so they can actually flourish.
I feel like one of the main things we're trying to get listeners to do right now is to critically think, because it seems like there's a big difference between something that's unjust and something that's inconvenient. And even certain forms of of a lack of justice, you should sit back and decide whether you're going to remove yourself from the situation or stay within it, is some of what we're saying. In the point of deciding to stay within it or not, that requires critical thinking, and that's what people aren't doing right now. They're just saying, oh, that hurt my feelings, so I just need to leave. And sometimes there's, 10 to 15 other options that they might be able to explore rather than just getting up and leaving. And what you decided to do was stay. So can you walk me through what that process was like for you and what actually critically thinking about how you're going to show up every day within that situation looked like?
Yeah. I think that because I naturally have intuition now, at that point in time, I just thought everyone was thinking the way that I did. When I would see this, when a situation would happen with me, I would always just unpack it. And I tried to look at every side and every angle. Now, your initial feeling is you're pointing and you're looking at the other person. They're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong. But as I got through that initial pain of that and really verbalized my pain, verbalized why I was frustrated, verbalized what I thought the person did wrong, I began to go a little bit deeper and ask the question, well, why does that bother me so much? And normally my first response would be, it's because they did this or they did this, which was true. But then I was like, okay, no, but why? But why when they said that? Or why when they, maybe passed you up on this? Why does that hit you so much? And when I started getting down to it, it was the fact of such a lack of trust in me and just in people and individuals. And just I would live my life so much that way. But I just always would think deeply about it. I would try to get to every side. I would try to actually look at the side of the other person. I would try to learn about the other person. Because when I learned about the other person, I began to understand why they actually would say and lead the way that they would lead. And it doesn't mean it was okay, but it actually started giving me more empathy. So, but you have to do it and you have to get through the initial pain. We don't like pain anymore. We don't like physical pain and we don't like emotional pain. Mm-hmm. And so we won't sit in stuff and actually sit in it and try to work to dig through it.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever talk to anybody else about it, or did other people feel the same?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, and again, there's a few different kind of places I was at that we really did, that we saw it, and we would talk about it. And sometimes, when you're younger, people, and let me just say this, I've been in some situations, throughout my leadership life before I started leading, to where, man, I got to see, honestly, just some bad stuff. Even again, as we talked about this podcast, being a Christian, I became a Christian at 19, seeing that in the church world. That's one of my things a lot. I hear people say those things. This is kind of my little rant of church hurt. If I actually explain the stuff that happened to me and what I saw, I have legitimately could have church hurt, but I still love the church. I still love Jesus. That's still not an excuse. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of those things, again, that's a whole other topic for another day. But people would see it and we would talk about it. And when you're younger, people would sometimes dismiss it. They would justify the stuff. Mm-hmm. And so when you're younger, you're like, oh man, maybe I'm just wrong. But as we got older, we're like, hold up. No, Chief. That's just bad.
Yeah.
And so, so people saw it and we would talk through it. And sometimes it got bad because why? You would end up gossiping about it. Because then you found camaraderie and you're dealing with your boss or you're dealing with your direct report or the culture you're in. You can find camaraderie there. And that's not healthy sometimes. You know what I mean? It's okay to identify, but it's not healthy to find camaraderie always. Because all you do is just stay swirling in the cycle of gossip and frustration. And that just builds more and more bitterness inside.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel like being Black has equipped you to be in spaces where you're not supported?
I'm laughing because, recently just dealing with situations where in this whole world we're living in right now, and I'm all for, again, part of what we do is in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. Mm-hmm. Try to say this carefully. But I see people who have good hearts, but many times, I'm just going to say it, sometimes I see white people who have really good hearts in this situation face any bit of resistance in the movement of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they fold. Because and then they'll talk to and they're looking for Black people or person of color to co-sign what they're saying. And we're like, dude, this is the struggle. We're so used to this. So this gets to my point of answering your question of being Black has taught me, man, when you go in spaces, because many times you're the first. My father was the first black head basketball coach at the University of Akron. So when my father took that job, here's what I knew from a young age. He was not going in there just for himself. He felt like he had the culture on his back. And sometimes people don't understand, but what you go in, you're going to have to be twice as good as somebody else. When you go in, you're going to face resistance. When you go in, people are going to question you. When you go in, man, somebody may be threatened by you just simply because of skin color and size. So what you learn to do, you just are built with resilience to get through it. But what I fear, and this is kind of now in today's age, is that instead of people staying and fighting and making something better, even in that fight, I see it a lot of times with people of color, many times where they'll get out. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, but what if you're the one to stay there and fight to make it better for the ones coming behind? See, that's the thing today. The one thing I learned from my parents, the one thing we saw during the civil rights movement, is they were fighting for themselves. They were fighting for the next generation. We live in such a self-absorbed culture. We're fighting just for us. And not that we won't have a benefit, but many times you got to think about somebody bigger than yourself. So when I stay places because I'm thinking about the next generation. I'm thinking about my kids. I am thinking about friends. I am thinking about their kids. I'm thinking about you, and I'm thinking about your kids. I'm thinking about we're building to try to create spaces for the next generation. And so that's kind of how being black, man, many times, especially in my generation, again, being Gen X, you're always taught to think about what's coming behind you.
So why would you do that if it's just going to hurt you?
Two things. Well, I'll say one. Like, my faith is super vital to me. And one of my favorite passages written by the Apostle Paul, he says this, that your life is not your own. It was bought at a price. Like, I believe that my life is not my own. I believe that as a follower of Jesus, that like, man, I am called to live my life in service of others. So why I do that and go through stuff is because like I was saying earlier, I think about others. I think about, man, going through that. And here's what I also learned too. As you go through things, man, you become better. Like, it's just, I mean, we think about it in life. I mean, like, I know how much you're into like fitness, right? Like, it's not like when you go to the gym, you're just like, man, that didn't hurt. Like, I know with you, injuries and things like that, I mean, again, it's like, I mean, you go to the gym, you're like, if it's a good workout, you're like, yo, that was horrible. Like, it was painful. But then you get to see the results as you can kind of stay the course. Same thing in leadership. You get better sometimes just through having to go through suffering and hardship. Now, again, there's a balance there. There's a balance. I'm not saying, man, stay somewhere too long, because sometimes your codependency will cause you to stay somewhere you don't need to be. But that's the idea of what you're saying earlier, the ability to have nuance and critical thinking to actually work through something.
Yeah, it seems like everybody has to have a good starting point of knowing what is important to them and how to run it through the grid of that, which, I mean, at some point in every single podcast, we come back to this. When you were in those kind of situations, did they ever help you realize what was important to you?
Absolutely. So this whole point of this podcast, authenticity. Man, one of the environments I was in, man, really with some people and some leaders who weren't really self-aware. They were good people, but were not self-aware and didn't have the results. So they lived very disconnected lives. You know, they practiced leadership. They said the right leadership things, but it wasn't really real to them. And so when I was in there, I'm like, I couldn't articulate what was wrong. But the older I got, the more I thought about it. I'm like, oh, that's what it is. Because I actually know how they really are. And sometimes I'm like, man, just be that. But they would put on this whole other performance. And I realized, no, authenticity is really important. Now, the thing about authenticity is that here's what I know about myself. I fully, I'm still in process of becoming more and more authentic. When somebody tells me I'm fully authentic, no, you're absolutely not. There are still masks and things you cover. I've been married for 22 years. And here's the thing about being married for that long. There's still parts of me that there's times I cover up. There's times in me, man, where I'm embarrassed. There's times in me where I feel some shame and I don't even want to share those things or whatever. And again, I'm still in process to somebody who's been committed to me, who loves me, someone who's shown nothing but just unbelievable amounts of loyalty, but yet and still, I still can cover. And sometimes she can do the same. And so I think that that's where the reality, where in those environments, I've learned to appreciate values. And I think you're right. You get in environments and you start to learn like, oh, this really matters to me. And so sometimes, me staying in an environment that somebody would maybe call like toxic or tough or whatever, it actually made me find the values that I so love.
When it comes to being in the workplace, or whether it's not the workplace, but just following some form of leadership that might be having some form of toxic behavior, what does conversations with that person look like? Like, how do you manage the tension between I'm going to be myself and I'm going to be honest, but you're also authority. And so there's an aspect where I do still have to follow your lead.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that?
I think that, first of all, you have to make sure that when you're going in, that you've processed like your stuff. Man, is this hitting me in the wrong way because of something going on in me? Is this hitting me in a way because maybe you grew up in an environment that, that this leader shows some things that seem familiar? I have had that happen before, where I've made a leader to be way more quote unquote toxic than actually they were because of my childhood. And so it amplified, even though they weren't doing that. It's just, I would feel something that was similar to that leadership I had when I was younger. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, oh no, you instantly start labeling that's toxic. So first of all, you have to dig in to make sure like how it's hitting you, what's going on in you. The next thing I would say, if you have somebody who you're working for, or who's your direct report, that you want to talk to them, I think the biggest thing is not going in on some like rah, like you're this, I expect you to change, Because I want you to think about how you want someone to talk to you. Let's say you have a blind spot or a mistake. Are you going to be better to receive that on some like, hey, you better change, mother, or like, no. Now, again, everybody thinks, I just want you to keep it real with me. No, you don't. Like, I hate when people say that. Just, I want you to be truthful to me. And then you're truthful, and then they like do that. No, talk to people the way you want to be talked to. So that would be the next thing. Go in and lead with some empathy. And then what I would do is just ask clarifying questions. Just saying, hey, here's what I'm experiencing. I've been experiencing this. When these moments happen, you say this. And sometimes, man, the way that you come off, I mean, it can be condescending. The way that you come off, man, you come off as belittling, whatever the thing is. And so am I missing that? And just start by asking questions. Now, I'm not saying at the end of it, they're going to be like, oh my God, thank you so much. You're the greatest person ever. Let me give you a raise. No, you may go and that leader may be like, nope, you're crazy. I'm going to keep leading that way. Okay. Then you have to make a decision. Do you want to stay the course? Are you supposed to be there? Or do you want to bail out? And so I think those are just all the things, because I've had those conversations, and the leader would give you lip service, but still there was like really no change, or they would justify why they did it. And there was moments where I was still felt like I was supposed to be there. So I stayed. Yeah.
And I feel like when we use the term bailout, it automatically has some form of negative connotation. So just being clear that we 100% believe that there are times that you should quit.
Yes.
You should change what you're doing.
Yeah. Like I could give you an example of a place where I stayed for a while. And then I'll never forget, I was having a conversation with the person leading this organization. And he said something to me. And it was like that moment inside where I'm like, yep, it's time to go. And I felt like it was no longer loyalty. I felt like it was disobedience for my next step. And so I had to like do that. So yeah, there's been times where I've left, where I stopped doing something because it was time to do that. I had learned all I can, and me staying now would have been out of my codependence, because like loyalty and commitment matters to me. So sometimes your values that are really important to you, when they're motivated from codependency, your values sometimes can go farther than they need to. You can stay somewhere longer than you need to. You can extend that value more than you need to, because the fuel behind that value is codependency and some brokenness, not actually a place of health.
Do you think that you exhibit any traits of a toxic leader?
Oh, 100%. Yes. I think one is I think quick, and sometimes quicker than most people. And so what I can do is talk. I can become frustrated very easily. And when I become frustrated very easily, I can talk down. I can make people feel smaller than what they need to be. Sometimes I wear my emotions on my sleeve, which again, we've talked about that. Like, I don't think that's as bad as what we've made it to be in the past. But sometimes I can get frustrated with people, not with what they're doing, but with something else. And so I think that's another one. And I think that comes from the fact that I can get on stage or speak and I'm just very brazy. Like, I'll say whatever. I really don't care. But because I do love people, sometimes it's hard for me to confront people one-on-one. So what I'll do is let the issue just go. And then sometimes somebody else will come in or something else happen, and I'll just be like, yo, it's a level 1 issue, and I just made it a level 10 because I'm not dealing with the stuff with somebody else. So I think those are some of the things. So what would you say?
I don't think that you said anything that I disagree with. I think, honestly, those are what I would have said. Sometimes in these moments, I like struggle because we have these conversations so frequently. Yeah. You know, sometimes someone poses an open-ended question, wants you to answer it, and you have something you want to get off your chest. I don't ever feel that way in these moments. Yeah. It's not because, just so the listeners know, it's not because I have an absence of things to say, but because we do talk about it so frequently. Yep. So I don't think there's anything you said that I would disagree with. I think I would have said all of that. Yeah.
Well, okay, go ahead. No, what are you about to say?
I was going to say that I think that sometimes because you are really intuitive and you can pick up on like kind of where the trail is heading. You, for example, you're having a one-on-one conversation with somebody. It's like you're going to be saying what you think is going to happen 10 steps from now. Yeah. That person might only be feeling where they are right now, or even maybe 5 steps from now. Yeah. And so you speak with such an intensity and like such an anger towards what could happen, and it freaks them out. Yeah. They're like, oh my God, like, wait, what? Like, I didn't think about that. And because you are a leader, people weigh the words that you say. That's actually something I would say is that you don't view yourself as how other people view you, and other people view you as a leader to them. And so the weight of your words carries so much more weight than what you think that they do. So when you say something, it's like that sticks, and the feedback you give them sticks in that person's head for quite some time, like, and really shapes how they start to approach like work and their day, and sometimes even their view of themselves. So that's what I would add.
That's really interesting, because I think that as you're talking, I think you're 100% right. And I think that, man, this is really good, because as what I'm processing in my brain is like, we talk about self-awareness, right? I talk about authenticity, self-awareness. Sometimes, like, I more go to the place, I think, of not seeing myself like to who I actually am. That can be toxic, because if you don't know the power you carry, you'll will that power, and you're not thinking you're wielding any power. And sometimes leaders they can go to the fact of thinking they're better than what they are, and that's toxic as well. But I think sometimes, because the way I go, it's way more looks like humility, right? Oh, servant leadership, humility, leaders eat last, all that, whatever. And I think that stuff's great. But that stuff's great when it's fueled from a place of purity and authenticity, not from a place of like brokenness, because when I grew up, I never, that's one of my life messagings. I'm not enough. So when you don't see yourself in a healthy way, it can impact people. And so that's very like, I appreciate you sharing that, because even as I'm learning, that's the beauty of podcasts and actually when you're like, oh, I just learned something about why you need to see yourself in a healthy way. And see, and as Bri was talking about, one thing that we do within our organization is that we do have times where I give them opportunities to give me feedback. Now, it's up to them to be honest with me. I think every leader should do that. But I think a lot of leaders are just too cowardly to actually let people tell them where they're wrong, and not look at them and start saying, well, I know it's because of your trauma from your past that you're saying this. No, because there's going to be some level of truth that you can actually learn from it and actually get better. It's like, I think as Billy Graham once said, let your critics be your greatest coaches. And so I think you can actually learn. And so I would tell you, if you're leading people, man, have moments of critical feedback. Let people tell you that, and have enough awareness and toughness to hear what they're saying. Take that, talk to people about it, and whatever's real and not, it really can be a good part of your leadership.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking about this a little bit more in a work environment context. Do you feel like this applies to relationships across the board too?
Absolutely. Because I think in relationships, people today, you think about personal relationships. I think people quit on people way too much and way too fast. Now, what I mean by that is this. Again, I'm always going to clarify this, but I hope that people, if you listen to us enough, know that I am never saying, hey, stay in a relationship where you're being abused, where you're being harmed. Never stay in a relationship where you're being manipulated, where you're purposely being all the stuff. No, that's off limits. But relationship has tough moments because you're dealing with two humans. Mm-hmm. There's probably moments where people could look at my relationship with Wendy, and from my point of view, and from her point of view, where people are like, they could label it today as toxic. Because here's the thing. My wife has had wild success in the business she runs. I've had a lot of success in what I do. You have two high-functioning leaders in a house. Yeah, there's just going to be conflict. You know what I'm saying? Because you both think you're right. And so you're going to have you're going to have moments to where it's going to feel that way. There was moments for me with Wendy because remember I said, I think very quick to where, and Wendy's she processes and builds things out. And so at times when I would my anxiety would get high, I would, and I would say something and I felt like she wasn't answering. Way I would respond would be harsh. It would be she would feel like I'm talking down. And that's something I still have to work through now. But some people would say today, oh, that's toxic. He's talking down to you. He doesn't see your value, your worth. That wasn't it. It was just my brokenness. There's times with Wendy to where she would struggle with because she never dealt with depression or anything like that, to where sometimes her frustration towards me because of it. And people would say, that's toxic. How does she not give you room for that? That's a mental health issue. No, she just had no understanding of what this was like. Mm-hmm. And so she was learning and growing. But there was resistance that was there. Mm-hmm. I see people do it all the time, even in friendships. Man, I cannot tell you how many people I hear yell out 4L, but be quick to just bail on their friends because, oh, she's toxic or he's toxic or, oh, you know what I'm saying? He switched sides because they tell you truth. Man, get you some friends in your life that actually tell you truth. If you don't have a friend who tells you truth, dude, that's a sad place and a hard place to be if you don't got anybody in your life like that.
Mm-hmm. I feel like the point is that everybody has a shadow side.
Yep.
And to expect that within the course of a lifetime that's just going to disintegrate is so incredibly unwise.
Yep.
And so if that's what you're expecting, and every time that happens, you're just going to leave. You're going to find yourself in a place where you have a lot of relationships and none of them are meaningful and none of them have depth to it because you don't know how to stick through them whenever things get painful. Yeah,
because here's the thing. I think you said it right. I tell people, year 7 of your marriage, you wake up to oh, shoot, they ain't going to change in this. And see, that messes people up because, we all think we're better than what we are. We think, oh, my charm, my love for them, my care for them, me showing them this is going to change them. And then you wake up oh, shoot, they may never change. So now what? That is why I say a marriage, a covenant is so powerful because it's this binding agreement, meaning there's no outs. Now you have to really engage one another. And I think that's so important for people. What you're saying, I think that, man, people are sometimes they're not going to change. There are going to be certain parts of my life that I'm not going to change. I'm probably, to the day I die, will see the world glass half empty. It's just some of the way I've been wired. Some of it's my brokenness. But it doesn't mean, but I have to learn how to manage that shadow side. But everybody has a shadow side. And in today's world, we want everyone to be perfect. But again, I want you to view yourself. I want you to view others the way you want people to view you. Because when we start viewing people always from just, man, you have to be perfect, you can't make any mistakes, that's just a crazy place to live. And let me tell you this, you'll live a very shallow life. Very shallow. Well, guys, I hope this moment has been helpful for you. And again, when we talk about toxic and toughness, you need to hear don't stay into a relationship or stay in a situation that's toxic. Talk to somebody about it. But what I do want to stress to you is that we're in today's world, authentic leaders are going to be needed in the future, but authentic leaders need to be tough. And the only way that you get tough is to be in tough environments, to be in situations that builds resilience inside of you. Because what happens is that when you don't learn how to build toughness, then when you start to veer off in your self-awareness, there's toughness, resilience brings you back. But you have to be in environments like that. So I'll be really careful not to just leave every relationship or every situation or job that has toughness to it or has resistance to it. But maybe you need to stay. Maybe you stay in a situation that's a toxic, maybe work environment, because there's something being built in you. All great stories. I love biographies. And there's not one biography of someone great that did not have to go through hell. Like there's just never. Like I've read so many. And there's not one person who we would say is a hero, made this impact without their origin story, without the tough parts. Maybe that is your origin story. Maybe that's the part what you're in right now is building you to be that leader, because when you get your chance, you're not going to do that because you've learned. You're not bitter. You're better because of it. Until next time, keep writing new rules.